And we are back. I'm David Boles. This is Boles.tv. B-O-L-E-S, period, T, and a V. And I'm spelling it out for our friends who are watching via closed captions, because when I say my name, it closed captions my name with a W. There is no W in Boles. And I can't correct it. It just does it. So we're here every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. trying to figure out the human condition. And one topic that has fascinated me all of my life is this idea of eugenics. This idea of finding the better person, the uncanny valley, pro-choice, pro-life, pro-person. Now, it's very interesting to me that there are very conservative religious people who are against 100% eugenics, which is that in itself wonderful, but also very limited when you listen to what they're talking about. Because pro-life people often are not pro-people people. Because if you were pro-people, just not pro-fetus, pro-baby, pro-infant, people would not be suffering because of economic need or disability. They would be provided appropriate assistance. And many of the states are not providing assistance once a person reaches the age of adulthood. You're on your own. That's the American way. Pro-life, not pro-person. And as we've discussed on this live stream before in the past, a lot of those people now are, believe it or not, moving to Utah. And they're not getting help from the state of Utah because the state of Utah refuses to help poor indigent people, not pro-people. However, the Mormon Church is based in Salt Lake City, in Utah. The Church of Latter-day Saints, as they prefer to be called. And they have a very robust food bank. You join the church, you become a part of the church, part of the family, and your bishop or stake master, whatever they call them, stake seed neighborhood person, may in fact help you and give you food and money to survive. And in Utah, the biggest provider of public welfare, of taking care of poor people, pro-people people, is, excuse me, the Mormon Church. It is not the state of Utah. So that's very telling. And in many ways, the Church of Latter-day Saints is putting their money where their beliefs are. And they are doing their best to help people. And people are moving to the state of Utah to get that help. So Mike Pence, former vice president under the Donald, gave a speech, pro-life speech, anti-birth control, protection against conception, claiming that birth control is eugenics. And I understand that argument, but I don't think that it is textually and conceptually appropriate. Because eugenics is really about disability, and eugenics is about race. It's not really about unborn babies who aren't born because their mother took a contraceptive pill. I don't get that leap. I guess the idea is that any baby that is prevented from being born is eugenics. I believe that's the general thinking. And I admit it confuses me. It doesn't make sense. The Catholic Church is also very... excuse me, my neighbor is hotboxing me. Take a sip of my Jan Marie. In the merch store. Bolesby/merch. Bolesby.com. The Catholic Church is anti-eugenics. And so we're going to see over the space of a few minutes, we're going to talk about this. The wide variety of how the idea of eugenics is being employed against and for people and causes. and a lot of invoking of Hitler, although it extends far beyond the reaches of Mein Führer, or Herr Führer, whatever the Führer. So here's the Catholic Church Commission talking about the Rockefeller Commission, talking about poor people and choice and Roe versus Wade. The Rockefeller Commission was also wrong, the Catholic Church says, when it contended that with the increasing availability of contraceptives and improvements in contraceptive technology, the need for abortion will diminish. The Catholic Church's point of view is, we now know that following Roe versus Wade, both contraceptive use and abortion rates increased dramatically, according to the Catholic Church. If there is one demographic segment of the population that the Rockefeller Commission believed was a problem, it was African Americans. The Rockefeller report said that if blacks could have the number of children they want and no more, their fertility and that of the majority white population would be very similar. The goal could not be more plain. Get blacks to stop reproducing. What they need, the report said, was greater access to various means of fertility control. Excuse me. So now the Catholic Church is tying in contraceptive and abortion to the Rockefeller Commission in the 70s, that contraception focused on the black community is eugenics. Some of the Commission's members cited Planned Parenthood's efforts to meet this goal. Mission accomplished. It was reported in 2020 that Planned Parenthood locates 86% of its abortion clinics in or near minority neighborhoods. Though blacks are 13% of the population, they account for 1/3 of all abortions. So that is from the Catholic League. Now, that article does not go on to explain that the reason that Planned Parenthood appears in urban and low-income areas is because they're not served by regular doctors and hospitals. They go where the need is. They go where the people need help. And if people are having trouble with contraception and getting pregnant more often than they would like, where are they supposed to go? Well, in these cities, they go to Planned Parenthood and they get help. And the Catholic League is against that. They believe that is eugenics. So now we go backward in time. The Catholic League is talking today, Mike Pence talking today. This is the Mexican Revolution. And what happened shortly after the Mexican Revolution? The country's leader believed the best way to create a healthy, young generation in Mexico was through campaigns and efforts to minimize disability. In their eyes, disability, both physical and intellectual, was the effect of unhygienic living conditions or poor parenting. Minimize the cause, they figured, and the effect is ultimately reduced. What does that mean? In Mexico's case, the approach to people living with disabilities in the early part of the 20th century aligned with the country's overarching goal of eugenics. The promotion of desired characteristics in order to improve future generations. Mexico's version of eugenics wasn't as harsh as those adopted by other countries. For example, there were no sterilization programs for people with disabilities such as conducted in Nazi Germany, or the United States in the 1930s and 40s. Mexico's government still believed disability could be minimized. So disabled people are considered broken people by the political and medical communities. In the Mexican archives, it was discovered that a great deal of scrutiny was paid to children, including anthropometric measurements of their bodies, lung capacity, height, weight, as well as their IQs. It's very closely tied to notions of race and racialization. There's a sense in which the ideal Mexican population is mestizo, a mix of indigenous and European ancestry coming together to forge a new and powerful race. And so, part of those measurements and interest in gradually purging the nation of unwanted differences coincide with that racial imperative. The use of IQ tests, along with anthropometric testing, meant that school children were labeled as retrasados, or delayed, and placed in different groups or sent to special schools. Terminology such as idiots, imbeciles, and feeble-minded was used. Large sectors of the population were classified as abnormal because of their socioeconomic status, disability, or appearance. In some cases, the families of children with disabilities received public welfare. But many of them were kept in institutions against their will. Some children, either because of disabilities, behavior, or socioeconomic status, were sent to farm schools where they were expected to work to partially subsidize their cost of living. One of the conclusions from the research is that eugenics, as a way of thinking, doesn't really end in the 1940s. Many of these ways of thinking about what constitutes a healthy child or a normal person continue and are permitted and perpetuated in totally different ways today. So that's Mexico. Now we turn to the great state of California for a whole new box of eugenics surprises from the past. As the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund explained in a supportive statement, between 1909 and 1979, 70 years, California law directed the administrators of state institutions to forcibly sterilize individuals whom they deemed unfit for reproduction. California administered the nation's most aggressive sterilization program. The forced sterilization program evolved from a then popular eugenics movement that tried to improve the human race by limiting reproduction from mentally disabled people, poor people, and minorities. That thinking obviously was a stain on American society, but it emanated from the progressive movement and its fixation on using government for an uplift. So we move from 1979 to 2022 with this interesting and yet completely frightening news. Mr. Rath's biotechnology class at East Greenwich High School had students giving a chance to do an experiment using CRISPR in a laboratory. Great opportunity, right? first in the state for a high school. CRISPR stands for Clustered Regularly Interspaced Palindromic Repeats. The name may not roll easily off the tongue, but it has been in the news a lot lately because CRISPR is a revolutionary gene editing tool. In basic terms, the process involves using the Cas9 enzyme to cut DNA at a specific location and then adding or deleting segments of DNA before joining the two segments back together again. Although there have been other gene editing technologies, none have been as easy, accurate, and precise as CRISPR. The technology offers promise and could potentially be a game changer in terms of biomedical research, the treatment of various diseases and disorders, and maybe even the cure of certain genetic disorders such as Huntington's disease and cystic fibrosis. So doesn't that sound great? Hey, revolutionary Mexico, what if they had CRISPR? Hey, state of California, 1909, next 70 years. Don't have to sterilize people, we'll just start CRISPRing them from birth. We'll alter the DNA of fetuses to edit out the traits and the disabilities that we don't like. Gene splicing is the wave of the future. Now, is that eugenics? Excuse me, is the Catholic League going to come out against CRISPR because it's eugenics? Will Mike Pence be giving a speech about CRISPR killing people? Well, it's not killing them, it's just improving them. So maybe they'll be in favor of this CRISPR, of changing the DNA of people. But if you believe if God made you, if God put the soul in man, humankind, womankind, did not God also create the DNA strain? If God didn't want disabled people, why are they here? Who created them, if not for our fearless leader? So this gene splicing thing with CRISPR stuff is and they're doing it in high school. Soon you'll have black market 7 and 8-year-olds online saying, hey, you want the perfect baby? Send me $1 and I'll cut your DNA for you and send it back to you. I'll do it over the internet in a file. How far away are we from that? And we'll all look perfect, and we'll all look the same, and we'll all have the same standard of beauty and intelligence. No one will be able to be smarter than the other, because we'll all be splicing our genes to get the DNA that we want, and not the DNA that we have. And now we have the conclusion, in a very odd and pensive way, of bringing this conversation around to the illogical conclusion of eugenics and gene splicing into more creative ways to kill people. The great state of Alabama plans to finalize its protocol for executing death row inmates by nitrogen suffocation. Just give them a few months and they'll be right there. An execution using the nitrogen method, involves replacing oxygen needed to breathe with nitrogen gas. A gas chamber. And it's never been carried out in the United States. The use of nitrogen suffocation was approved by the Alabama legislature in 2018, with those on death row able to opt into an execution using the method. Oklahoma and Mississippi are the only other states to allow the practice of nitrogen gas to kill you. State-sponsored murder. The revelation regarding the timing of nitrogen suffocation executions came in the case of Matthew Reeves, a condemned inmate who says state prison officials violated his rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Reeves argued in federal court that the Alabama Department of Corrections was required by law, but did not provide him help to understand the form that could have allowed him to choose death by nitrogen suffocation. Earlier this month, a federal judge said Reeves's argument was substantially likely to succeed in court and issued an order blocking his execution, which was scheduled for 2 days from now. So he's saying he wanted to maybe opt into this, but because he is perhaps not able to understand reading or writing, or he's illiterate or some other thing, he is disabled, and the court did not help him understand his options. In a 37-page opinion, U.S. District Court Judge Austin Huffaker noted that prison officials were on notice that Reeves had IQ scores in the high 60s or low 70s, sub-average intellectual functioning, and had been found to be functionally illiterate a mere 2 months before it handed him the election form if he wanted to die if he had nitrogen gas or not, and expected him to comprehend and utilize it without accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The state of Alabama has appealed that decision, saying the order by Huffaker, a Trump appointee, was clearly erroneous, and that the court had abused its discretion in ruling that death row inmate Matthew Reeves's disability and need for accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act were open and obvious. And that is the insanity of it all, my friend. Pro-life, not pro-person. Well, here's some guy on death row that doesn't understand the easy ways to kill him, and so we have to do a do-over. Well, what if we had CRISPR when he was born, and then Alabama wouldn't have to worry about executing him because he doesn't understand anything? And what if he was born in Mexico? We'd never even see him because he would have been taken care of. Or if he was in California, he would have been sterilized, and then he wouldn't be able to reproduce this criminal mind and this ineptitude to read a simple piece of paper. The eugenics bubble is a big circle, a Mobius strip that goes around and around and around, and where it lands, nobody knows. And we're going into unfirm, undetermined territory, and the risk to life and health and the future of a world population is very real and very damaging, and we need to stop and ask, where are we going and where have we come from? And now we will take our final break of the day. Back in just a moment.